Okay, welcome back. So that is kind of the course in a nutshell. I did want to talk to you a little bit about the textbooks. These are the two textbooks required for the course. Strategies for reading assessment and instruction, and then the qualitative reading inventory. You'll see that I'm using edition 5. There is an edition 6 out there. However, I asked the bookstore to get us 5. I feel like it's a little more user-friendly than 6. However, if you got the 6th edition, that's totally fine. We will make it work. There's just a few differences, not a huge deal. So we will work through that. An optional book that I absolutely love, and I would have used it for the textbook for the course, except it's out of print, is Diagnostic Literacy Assessments and Instructional Strategies. And this is one that I will actually make some copies of some of the content in it. I have to be careful with copyright not to copy too much of it to share with you. But it is one that I would recommend you maybe have in your toolkit or in your professional library as you're developing it. I did go online this weekend and found some copies as cheap as $3 on Amazon. So you can find them out there. It's just I can't use it for the course because we can't readily get it, and I can't guarantee that everyone in the class could get it. So definitely one I would recommend you take a look at. I will have it in class when we meet. And so you can take a deeper look at it and see if it's something that you're interested in purchasing. But probably one of the best assessments and instructional strategies book that I've seen. I do also really like the one we're using for class. I just feel like the Diagnostic Literacy Assessments and Instructional Strategies is just a little bit more user-friendly. The one we're using for class tends to be a little more textbookish, if you will. So next, what we're going to do is we are going to use a KWL. So hopefully you're familiar with that. KWL is a strategy used to activate background knowledge and also to help guide my planning in the course, if you will. So today what we're going to do is we are going to fill out the K and the W. And then at the end of the course, I will collect these and save these. And at the end of the course, I'll give it back to you to fill out the L piece. So I have hard copies. And so what I would like for you to do is just go ahead and fill out what do you already know about literacy assessment, literacy testing, and what are some things that you want to know about them. So we're going to pause the video here and you're going to just take a few minutes and fill those two sections out. Please do write your name on the top. And then what we're going to do is I will look through kind of what you already know and find commonalities, and there may be some things that we may not need to cover as heavily in the class because you already have an awareness of them. And then I'll also be looking at what you want to know and make sure that we cover those or answer those questions during the course of the class. If I feel like it's not in the scope of the class, then what I'll do is give you some references that you could on your own go forth and seek more knowledge about that topic, if you will. So we're going to pause the video here and give you some time to fill out your K and your W. All right, coming back. Now we're just going to do a little bit of a lecture on some of just the real basics of assessment to kind of set the foundation for our course. So basically there are 4 basic categories of assessments, and we call them the 4 Ps because they all begin with P. The first category is predicting, and those are generally screening assessments. They often fall, if you think about our tiered intervention model, they fall in those universals. And we do those screenings with all students, and it really provides information about knowledge and skill base of our students. So just that basic I like to think of those as kind of a little dipstick, where you're checking your oil, although I don't even know if we do that anymore, but you've got your little dipstick to check your oil, and you're kind of seeing where we are with the oil. You know, do we need a little bit more? Are we doing all right? Or are we in the danger zone where we better do something or it's going to mess up our car? The second one is planning. And with planning, those are the things we're going to really use for instruction. So those tend to be a little bit longer than our predicting assessments. They're more diagnostic in that we're going to be able to determine strengths and weaknesses for our particular students. Or we're going to be able to see where there might be some skill gaps that we might need to plan for mindfully. And that could be skill gaps within groups of our class, or it might be just certain individuals that we find. So predicting is one we kind of do maybe at the beginning of the school year. Sometimes we do them 3 times a year. We call them benchmarks, beginning, mid, and end. Planning is something we do more ongoing, and a lot of times they can be formal and informal. So it's really helping us decide where are we going to next. Next is progress monitoring, and those are definitely more frequent, and they're typically formative measures. And they help us to see, are kids making the progress they need to make, and are they getting what we've taught? And if not, we might need to go back and strengthen something. So let's say, for instance, we just taught a lesson on the water cycle, and we do a quick informal assessment about it, and half of our kids didn't get that concept or have misconceptions about that concept. That lets us know as teachers that we need to go back and do some firming up of that concept. A lot of the tools that we use for planning and progress monitoring overlap, and in fact any assessment can overlap through these areas. The last area is performance, and that's our mastery or our outcome assessment. And that really tells you, that's kind of, I call the performance test kind of autopsy data. For example, our MAP assessment would be a performance test, where we have a standard criterion that we're looking at students in certain grade levels to meet. And we're talking about, did they meet it or not? Did they make the progress that they needed to make in order to master 3rd grade or master 2nd grade? These performance tests oftentimes really don't give us a ton of good information that's really going to help the students at that point. So, for example, the MAP test. Kids take it in 3rd grade. When we analyze the results of that test, it's not really going to help that student, but it could help us as instructors to look at our curriculum, see strengths and weaknesses, where we can strengthen that for the next 3rd grade class. One way it can be used, but often is not, is by the next year's teacher to say, wow, kids really didn't get this concept, so I need to cover that before I move on. But typically, in real life, what we see is 4th grade teachers are focused on the 4th grade content, and they've got to get through that so that they perform well on their mastery test. And so very rarely do we go back and look at, wow, our 3rd graders are really missing this concept, and we need to go back and remediate that before we move on to 4th grade content. So let's talk about some examples of the P's. So for predictive, we might think of vision and hearing screenings. Those are usually done universally, and let us know if there might be a problem. Kind of again, but you're probably going to have to go to an audiologist or an ophthalmologist to get further testing done to really pinpoint what might need to be done to correct those things. School-wide academic screenings like Acuity or STAR, things like that. And then oftentimes school districts do kindergarten screenings, which would be that predictive measure. Planning and programming, we're looking at more normative assessments of academics, behavior, language, motor skills, adaptive skills, all those great things. So Discovery Ed, Acuity, Tungsten, when we're doing those monthly checks with those tests. For phonics survey, high frequency words checklists, vocabulary survey, those sorts of things. They're really going to help us plan our instruction and say, okay, here's what kids know, here's what we need to work on next. And then progress monitoring are more like your curriculum-based measures, or your CBMs. So Ames Web, Dibbles, Easy CBM, the Yearly Progress Pro. There's a new one out now called FastBridge that a lot of districts are moving to. Or it could be a common formative assessment. So it could be a common formative writing assessment, or maybe you have for certain units of study some common formative assessments that your grade level has developed, or your district has developed for certain grade levels. Your performance tests, again, are your MAP tests, your end of course exams, your chapters or unit exams can also be performance tests. And then we can also look at grades for that. So what I would like for you to do now is just take a few minutes and think about some of the assessments you use in your classroom or in your district, and think about what area they might fall under. Knowing that, as with Acuity, it can be predictive, but it can also be used for planning and programming, and to some extent progress monitoring. So just we're going to pause here, and I'm going to end this recording and then go into another one in a few minutes. But I want you just to take some time to think about the assessments that you've had experience with or that your district currently uses, and plop them into those pieces. And then let's just have a quick discussion of where you put some of those different measuring assessments. Okay, we are back. So hopefully that was a good discussion that you had with the class. And now for kind of our last thing, I want you just on a quick post-it note to write a takeaway that you had from class this evening. So just one thing. It can be something you're looking forward to. It can be something that you learned. It can be a concern that you have for the class. But take at least one post-it note. You can take more than one, and write a quick takeaway, and then we will turn those in before you leave this evening. Real quickly before you do that, though, let's talk a little bit about next week, week 2 of the class. We will be covering chapters 1 and 2 for our reading assignment. And again, we'll be talking about informal versus formal testing, norm reference versus criterion reference testing, screening versus diagnostic, and kind of go over some common testing terms. If you haven't already, please make sure you do sign up for which chapters you will be facilitating. I fully expect that no one's going to sign up for the chapters for next week, and I will be facilitating those, which is totally fine. But if someone would like to sign up for those, please feel free to. Again, I apologize for not being there in person for class this week, but look forward to meeting you guys all in person next week. And if you have any burning concerns or questions, please feel free to give me a call before class, or email me before our class next week. Otherwise, have a great week, and I'll see you soon.